Welcome back to Future Dreamers, everybody. I'm excited to get into this episode because I'm transitioning to a bit more solo episodes that are going to help you understand different facets of astrology. And most importantly, how do you use astrology in your real life? Because that is what I am about. That's why I created Starelai. That's why I create the content I do, because my biggest dream is that the democratization of understanding your consciousness is going to become way more normal in the future that we're all building on this earth. And so as part of my devotion to that effort, building Starly was an opportunity to build a piece of software that lives on your phone, lives on your computer, that will give you up-to-date access to your cosmic data, which is what your astrological data is. And so today's topic is about the shift of the lunar nodes, which are the top and bottom points of the moon and the zodiacal signs at which they intersect with the Earth's ecliptic. Now, there's astronomical data going on there, but what does it mean in a tangible sense in your life, in the global collective evolution of consciousness and your consciousness individually? So the North Node represents essentially karmic lessons around where we need to be growing into. You have a North Node placement in your birth chart and a South Node placement in your birth chart, but the nodes are always shifting and they move in a retrospective motion. They move backwards. And so the North Node being where in your birth chart, being where your soul wants to incur the most growth in this lifetime. And the South Node representing this may be where you really got good at things in a past life and you kind of mastered those lessons. And it's important for you to retain whatever skills that you gained in those previous lifetimes where you really honed in on that zodiacal development. But it's not a great idea for you to stay in the comfort zone of just that experience. So it's an opportunity to integrate the growth that you want to experience through your North Node, but also like taking advantage that you have deep skills usually wherever your South Node sits. So we know that astrology is always updating. It's always moving because the sky is always moving. And so the sky acts as this natural clock of natural patterns that we can use kind of with the magical axiom as above, so below. What can I learn about what's going on in my internal world from watching these bigger patterns play out in nature? And so collectively, we are now experiencing the shift from the North Node being in Aries and the South Node being in Libra, which was occurring for the last 18 months. And now it's shifting to the Pisces Virgo axis. And so it's shifting backwards, so Aries is the first sign of the zodiac and Pisces is the last sign. So I think this is a really interesting shift we're going to experience. And it's going to happen on a collective level and on a personal level. And so I want to talk about, as I move into these solo podcasts, what I'm really trying to model for you is how you can use astrology to track and get deeper into the evolution of your own conscious development. Because if there is any opportunity in this lifetime worth like grabbing and taking a hold of, it's using our consciousness as a vehicle for refining our experience in this lifetime. And it's an opportunity to be a lifelong learner, which is a huge passion of mine. So what can we learn from the lunar nodes, and how can we string it into a larger story collectively and individually? Because the last year and a half essentially was focused in this Aries Libra axis. Now the next year is going to be focused on Pisces Virgo. And then the year after that is going to be Aquarius and Leo. So I'll break down each of these sort of zodiacal pairings because each of the zodiacal signs in question are opposite each other. So they're opposite ends of experience. They want integration. They're not trying to beef with each other. They want you to experience both sides of the spectrum and then find that beautiful place of the middle way, the integration point. And so I'll talk about this a little bit biographically so that you can just get a flavor and it being like more tangible to you. And then in whatever way it resonates, figure out and contemplate how these zodiacal archetypes in terms of the North and South nodes that we're going to be talking about like make specific sense to you. And at the end of this video, I'll give you like specific step-by-step tips on how you find out where the lunar nodes are hitting your chart, how you find out where your birth chart placement of the North Node and the South Node are, and how you can actually track where the North Node and South Node as it is moving today is hitting your chart, because that's where it gets really interesting when it comes to figuring out what's going on in your own story. So I'm going to tell it through the lens of my story, but then encourage you and give you the tools, tips, and tricks to go figure out how this is going to play out in your story. Because, hopefully that's what you're going to do with this information. So, okay, let's start with the last year and a half when the North Node was in Aries and the South Node was in Libra. So what is the zodiacal archetypal flavor of Aries? It's the beginning of the zodiacal season. It's the beginning of spring. It's a fire sign. Like basically when it's the energy of a seed, which is represented by Pisces, which is the end of the life cycle, has donated all of its collective knowledge of the whole entire sphere of experience of human consciousness and put that seed in an information packet that is going to be broken open by Aries and shot up through the soil. If you imagine a seed planted in dark, dank soil, and it has to use its internal flame to bust out of the casing of the seed and use its devotion to all the knowledge that was packed into the seed by Pisces, all this sort of like esoteric remembrance of the past and the life cycle that was finished. And remember that it is the initiation of a new life cycle, a totally new spin around the wheel. And in order for it to get to experience and have a chance to experience all that's going to come in the life cycle, it's got to get out of the dirt and into the sun. So that's what I think is so cool about the characteristic of fire in the zodiac season of the zodiac sign of Aries, is it's like got to be that straight line from the soil to like out into the air. It can see the sun, and it has done its job. It has done that initiatory journey of moving upwards so that Taurus season can now take over and the plant can start to grow and experience, growth upon the surface of the earth. And so the idea of the North Node in Aries being like, how do you find your initiation into who you are as an individual? Because as the opposite of Libra being, towards the middle of, it's like the beginning of fall. It's a season of gathering in groups. Libra is the sign of balance, of the scales, of wanting justice in the collective and a very collective energy in general. And so, if you can imagine being a farmer in the olden days and like you've done all of the work to harvest the grains and the fruits of your fields, and now you want to gather with the community. And we're taking a look at this through the lens of the South Node, which the South Node is where we want to stop relying on our comfort zone. And so the last 18 months was this opportunity to figure out a balance of the North Node in Aries asking us to find our deep individuality, and like initiate ourselves into defining that, into experiencing that through whatever processes that we went through, whether it was becoming a content creator in my case, whether it was starting a soul business in my case. I went through all these lessons that encouraged me to redefine and understand in greater dimension and initiate myself into who is the next level of my individuality, while I experienced lessons around letting go of over comfort in relationship. And if we've all experienced the dynamic of being in groups, we know that being in groups is humans want to be in packs. We're a tribal species. But when you get into groups, you realize that being around people is where you learn some of the deepest lessons of your evolution. And it causes you to come into your power or potentially give your power away, depending on how sovereign you are in your own individual being. And so the lessons of Libra and the South Node kind of you can sum it up to where are you giving way into people pleasing, and how can you see how that doesn't actually in the long run, kind of make for sustainable group harmony. Like giving respect and reverence to your Aries North Node in the last year and a half of experience is like you deserve to be in your sovereign individuality, but also be balancing the needs of the group, but not over giving of yourself and not accepting behavior that doesn't actually foster group coherence, and figuring out all of the lessons that may come up for you as you play out that experience that is going to usher you into the next level of conscious development. So for me, just to give you like kind of like an experience of how I moved through the last year, it's been about 2 years since I got the idea for Starelai, and I began the development of like creating an independent astrology software, which was really fucking hard. It costs tens of thousands of dollars that, that's money that I paid myself through my savings. And it was really, the ethos of it was, I want to deeply invest in my magic in this lifetime, and using skills I have from my previous iterations of my career in software development, project management, software design, which is something I never expected to go back to. But when I got the download and I had, frankly, a mystical experience that gave me the screen layouts and what, the use cases and what the global potential benefit would be if there was an astrology software that connected with AI that essentially created a lifelong learning portal for any individual to track the development of their consciousness through understanding their astrology and being able to track all of the astrological placements that are always moving for you, was like, oh wow, that would be fantastical if that tool existed, but it didn't. So I had to go build it. So another thing I'll mention is that you want to take a look at where the nodes are hitting you in your chart, because it's going to be different for everybody. We're at a collective level, we'll all be kind of learning a similar flavor of lessons, but where it happens in your life, what planets it affects in your natal chart is going to be different for everybody. And so this is why I created Starelai, because I want this information to be really easy for you to gather. So you can go into Starelai and figure out through looking at your birth chart, where was Aries and Libra hitting your chart in terms of the houses. For me, Aries is in my 5th house, and then Libra is in my 10th, my 11th house. Yeah. It's like kind of like halfway 10th, halfway 11th. So for me, in the 5th house, Aries was hitting my arena of deep individual creativity. Huge lessons came to me around, not only do I need to initiate myself into a new level of creativity through creating this independent software, which I tried to bring all of my artistry, all of my mysticism, but all of my practicality of knowing how to build software, knowing how to design it, all of the data stuff, like all of the like really practical 3D stuff that you need to do to build like tangible working software, had to come into play, but I also wanted it to make it representative of my unique spark. That is where your unique spark that is kind of coalesced in your 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th house, it exteriorizes itself in your 5th house. And so for me, the last year was really like giving myself the permission to let my creativity exteriorize in such a big way. And how does that play to the south node, which for me was in my 10th and 11th house where Libra hits for me. And so that was around really addressing the fears I have about being judged externally for, coming out into the public sphere and declaring that I'm an astrologer. Like I told everyone on LinkedIn, which are people that I've worked with at like top consulting companies, like database engineers and, all these like very 3D professional people that I've worked with for the last 20 years, and being like, I created an astrology software. That's probably something is coming out of left field and you didn't expect. And then, speaking about this long effort to my family who doesn't necessarily resonate with astrology, and just being like, that's fine. I'm not trying to be a Baptist preacher to anyone and like guru anyone into being excited about astrology, but I know that there are millions of people who do see the value in a tool that allows us to get into deeper connection with nature and use that as a mirror for our own internal development. So because the spiritual realm in society doesn't have a lot of technical people in it yet. I mean, it has some, but it's not an overflow. I realized it was an opportunity for me to bring my practical knowledge and marry it with the deep artistry of my spiritual mission. And so that was, my fifth house Aries lessons of like initiating myself through this process of self-creation and coming into core stability around my sovereign creatorhood. And it was a ton of lessons. I mean, I was facing fears the entire way. And I think that is a lot of the journey of Aries. It's like it knows it needs to keep going. The entire rest of the life cycle depends on Aries' strength, that warrior Mars energy of like going out and doing the damn thing, because nothing else is going to be possible if it doesn't complete its initial mission. But it can be scary, because if it knows if it fails, all the rest of the processes will not have a chance to kick off. Then when you're dealing with the opposite counterpart, the opposite pole of Libra energy, where you want to be in harmony with the group and like really like just love the Venusian beauty of being in communion with your community, but you have to understand, how do you keep the scales balanced? You may have to create like deep boundaries for yourself so that your own creativity can be honored. And so I learned a lot about facing my fears of just discussing with my community what I was doing. And I didn't do that right from the jump. I waited until I had Starelai like kind of quite built before I told many people about it. And that was my own way of just moving through that fear of being judged externally for doing something that's so mystical, but also, required such a long, deep effort and deep investment in terms of time and money for me. And so as you kind of take a look in Starelai or whatever platform you want to use to figure out where was Aries in your chart and Libra in your chart, and what lessons were you learning? What houses was it hitting for you? I think that you can go on a really interesting kind of like a river of contemplation about the lessons you learned about coming into your sovereignty, whether it was in creatorship, whether it was in love, business, whatever it was for you. And then how did you balance that with relationship in communal realms, and what lessons did you learn around that? And I bet they were very fascinating. And so now that we're going to be in this era of Pisces and Virgo, and in a minute we're going to talk about how all of these things string together. Like none of these things are happening in a vacuum. If you think about how a flower unfurls its petals, it's like it all has to happen in a certain order, because that is how you'll get the full fluorescence of the pattern of the flowers opening. And so the same thing is happening with our consciousness. And if you go on YouTube and you Google the dance of the planets, you will see fascinating videos where through computer modeling, they've basically played out the long-term full orbital cycle of planets orbiting each other. And they draw little lines as the planets move about their orbits. And they draw mandalas that look like super complicated, beautiful flowers. And so that is such an amazing way to think about how our consciousness develops and how group consciousness develops, because we're all we're all fitting in some level of like parts to the whole. And so taking that idea of it's all a segmented procession of consciousness evolution at the collective level and at the personal level, and how astrology helps you track and follow those processes of the different levels of conscious evolution. We just went through Aries Libra, now we're in Pisces Virgo, and that is all setting us up to where we're going to be moving into in a year and a half, when the nodal axes shift from Pisces Virgo to Aquarius Leo. So let's talk about Pisces Virgo for a second, or a few minutes. So now that we have this solid understanding of who we are, and we understand how to balance respect for our individual sovereignty with the group dynamics from Aries Libra, we kind of got those lessons on lock. Now we have this beautiful opportunity to step into the North Node in Pisces. Pisces being the sign of the mystic, the sign of being able to feel the collective through deep oceanic empathy, like very Neptunian energy. And then Virgo as the balancing opposite side to that being deep practicality and earth sign. So Pisces is a water sign, Virgo is an earth sign. And so how those two collaborate to stabilize each other. Because Virgo, the shadows of Virgo, as we look to the North Node or the South Node in Virgo, what are we going to be learning to not lean on so much? Because we really want to be experiencing deep lessons in the Piscean realm, because that's where the North Node will be pointing. So Virgo being this sign of like earthy, stabilized practicality, but it can have the shadows of overanalysis, analysis paralysis, the inner mean girl or mean guy in your head, internal critical thinking. A lot of my clients that I speak to, whenever they have Mercury in Virgo or like deep Virgo energy, it's this opportunity to have like a super quality assurance person like stuck in your head. But the shadow of it is that it can get a little too overly critical and overly controlling of the details. And so this 18-month opportunity is going to be an opportunity to issue compassion to that grounded Virgo healer inside of us through the Piscean energy that can really feel into the all and really envision like what is collective empathy, like what is generational empathy, what is empathy between different nations, different geopolitical regions across time. You can really like get big and oceanic with it, as I mentioned, because Pisces is a water sign that is just like deeply oceanic, deeply Neptunian. And so how do you kind of like conceive of what these two energies can do together when they're beautifully integrated? I'm calling this next 18 months for myself, and feel free to use this if you want, is me stepping into my era of the practical mystic, the practical coming from the Virgo energy, where I'm leaning on those skills, but I'm not going too hard in the paint of being overly critical about myself. I know I will learn lessons about how to release my inner critic from gripping the wheel of progress, and rather stepping into a more balanced role of like, be the quality assurance manager, but don't stop me from progressing by like demanding that everything be perfect. Because in the Piscean realm of the North Node, stepping into my mysticism and embodying it. So for me, and again, I encourage you to go check out where this is going to hit in your chart. For me, this is going to activate my vertical axis. I have Pisces at my IC at the very bottom of my chart in the 4th house, and I have Virgo at the top of my chart at the 9th and 10th axis, and I also have my part of fortune in Virgo. So this for me is going to be around my career, which makes a lot of sense because the Aries axis activating my 5th house of soulful creativity. I created Starelai. I got going on my content journey. I faced a ton of fears around doing that. I now have a stable understanding of my sovereign creatorship. And now I'm going to ask my Virgo energy in my 9th house to stabilize me and ground me, but not hold me back through being overly critical and like being mean to myself in my inner world. And that is going to, when I find deep balance there, that's going to be grounding energy that allows me to really experience the Piscean mysticism of exploring my intuition and having Pisces in my 4th house of like rootedness, home, family. What are my ancestral ties? How am I healing my ancestral line through deepening my own relationship to my inner mystic? Not to be a mystic, like for peacocking on Instagram. I'm not interested in being anybody's guru. The only thing I'm interested in is being a catalyst as I find greater freedom in myself and issuing permission to anyone to go on their own individual version of becoming liberated in however they need to experience. But so that Piscean energy of allowing me to like really shoot the oak tree roots of my own embodied mysticism, not so much an intellectual style of mysticism, but how does intuition feel as it comes through me? How can I use this Virgo energy to stabilize me as I sometimes, like maybe on certain days, could have times when the Piscean empathetic overwhelm really hits me and maybe more intuitive thoughts than I can handle in my channel try and come through. I know that I can use and rely on the balance of the Virgo energy to like kind of give myself some guardrails to hold on to things. And especially for me, as this axis hits my embodied, rooted, grounding, sort of like feeling into my personal power in my 4th house, like truly who does it mean to be me in an embodied sense? Whereas in the Aries axis, I was experiencing it from a more creative standpoint. Now I'm truly embodying that in a deeply empathetic way, But if you're empathetic to with no boundaries, you're going to kind of lose all of your energy. And that's kind of a shadow of Piscean energy, is not being able to feel the boundary between yourself and others, which in the 3D world, we need our boundaries because we do need to give back to the collective through the vector of our own individuated self. And so that's a deep lesson for people who have big Pisces energy in their charts. And so we're going to all learn that in some form or format collectively over the next 18 months. So for me, the way what am I going to do with this tangibly? Because there's going to come a point, and you can track this in your personal natal transits, when the nodes are going to be exactly somewhere in your houses. And do you have any planets there? For me, I don't have any planets in the 4th house, and I have part of fortune in my 9th house. So I'm going to watch to see when the south node exactly hits my part of fortune and hits my MC. And because I have been on this 2-year journey of starting my soul business of Starelai, that requires me to be practicing my thought leadership in terms of my astrological knowledge, but balancing, how am I doing that for the community? How am I doing that for the external world in a way that is actually helpful? How am I giving you practical mysticism tips so that you can do it in your own life? And so I'm launching this business. I'm continuing this journey of creator, being a content creator at 42 and as a Scorpio with 4 planets in Scorpio, this isn't my natural state of being to be on camera and being a creator. But those were the fears I kind of faced in the last year and a half. And so now that I have that confidence, I'm able to add deeper meaning to it through the embodied mysticism that I'm going to practice in the next year and a half through really making a relationship with this Piscean energy. And for me, having it come through the 4th house of grounding the embodiment of my personal power, and then standing on the firm ground that Virgo can offer us. And for me, this is going to be in my 9th and 10th house of using this to launch into a new career, launch into a new stabilized soul business. So, for me, this is the era of the practical mystic. And I think that many people will find that idea resonates with them, and just how it manifests in your life is going to be totally unique and super specific to you. And we're going to see these lessons play out on the collective. And the way I'm excited to see that happen is we've had a year and a half of war around the world for the Aries North Node that we were moving into. And how did we balance that with watching it play out in the collective with Libra energy? How did we see things play out on social media and all the different kinds of discourse, so bringing your personal discernment to how you intake and participate in that dynamic. And now as we move into the Pisces Virgo energy, we need to come into our practical empathy. How do we show up as healers in the world in whatever way? You don't have to have healer as a badge on your business card. You can be a healer in many ways in your own life, in your family life, in your collective. But how do you do it practically? So I think this is going to encourage us to gain practical skills, learn how to plant a garden, learn how to make herbal medicine, learn DIY skills, and allow it to infuse grounded power into your inner mystic as you experience playing with your intuition, as you experience sharpening your intuition with the grounding aid of discernment. So I think that's going to be a big theme for the next year and a half. And what's it going to set us up for? Because in a year and a half, the nodes will shift again, and moving backwards, they will shift from Pisces North Node to Aquarius North Node, and Virgo South Node to Leo South Node. And so to just kind of wrap things up by kind of looking forward to what conscious experiences are we building upon through adding these layers. So the Aries Libra axis, that set the ground for us to now experience practical mysticism. And what is that setting the ground for as we move into the North Node in Aquarius and South Node in Leo in a year and a half? To me, that looks something like, after experiencing the entire range of collective empathy with Pisces in the North Node, how do we innovate our systems to make dignified living available to more and more people on Earth? That's what I think of in terms of Aquarian energy. How do we use revolutionary technology, but how do we infuse spirit into that technology? As AI, who the hell knows what AI will be doing in a year and a half? How do we use the Virgoan discernment that we're going to be cultivating over the next 18 months that's balanced with deep spiritual empathy to then create and innovate, renovate systems that are breaking down in this current era as Pluto moves out of Capricorn, because no system is meant to live forever. Like in the entire universe, systems always come into being and then they break down as they like get too crystallized in their structure. So we're all collectively witnessing that at the top level, medium level in our individual lives. And so as we move out of Pisces Virgo and into Aquarius Leo, how can we all play some part in innovating through technology of whatever type or stripe it is to, the Aquarian democratic desire for the collective flourishing, and not overly relying on our egoic requirement to get external validation coming from the Leo South Node that will be coming in a year and a half. Like balancing that yes, we deserve to be individuals as we give our contributions to the whole, but not doing it just because we want external validation. And so that'll be the kind of like duality of lessons that we learn as we move off of this Pisces Virgo axis and into the future. But to tie it up, do you see how they all like this, the experiences of the last year and a half inform the experience and collective and individual karmic lessons of growth that we're going to move into in the next 18 months, and how that's going to set us up for the next set of lessons, and so on and so forth, forever and ever. So I'm really excited. I'm excited to get into my feminine more in the next year and a half. I really realized that in the last year and a half, I was super in my masculine, and that's just kind of natural for me anyway. Like I have Mars in Capricorn. I just like grew up as a tomboy. I have a tractor sitting out there, and I do have a lot of masculine responsibilities through like keeping up with my ranch, clearing brush, like fireman, brush management, taking care of a lot of animals and all of that kind of good stuff. But in order to get into my practical mystic, in order to get into my Piscean embodiment of my fourth house, I'm going to have to soften and surrender and like realize I can't control everything, and nor would I want to. And that's where the Virgoan energy is going to help me feel balanced. Like I've done a lot of work to create a home environment that makes me feel safe and happy. And the Piscean energy in me is going to want that for everyone. And it's going to dream ahead to the Aquarius North Node that we'll be moving into. So I'll kind of like leave that as like a little fun carrot chandelier that I'll just have in the back of my mind, is like, for whatever luxury of safety I've built for myself in the world, which obviously is not, it's like not just me that did it. I live in a world that allowed me to do it. And the deep gratitude of that is going to inform how can I be a participant in creating whatever structures contributing to the ground floor of structures that will allow democratized, dignified standards of living that can proliferate around the world. And whether it fully comes to fruition in this lifetime or not, I can't predict or hold on to that. I just know I have to participate in whatever way I can. And not do it for the external gratification, like not doing it because I will get the gold star and everybody will see that, Leo South Node that we'll be moving into in a year and a half. So I hope that gave you a rundown kind of through the lens of how I've experienced the last nodal positions, how I'm going to move into this one. And you will learn as these energetic waves come towards you, being able to see your astrology, being able to see that, I know where in my houses this is hitting me. I get a view of the shape of the wave, but you only know the intimacy, the intricacy of the waves when you're surfing it. So that's why I highly encourage you to use Starelai, this magical astral grimoire that I created, to track your own astrology, to get into it so that you understand your psychology at a deeper level. So many of us weren't encouraged to do that, growing up. I certainly wasn't. I was just kind of like sink or swim. But when you realize that you can find deeper wells of self-love, the more you understand what's going on in your brain, like what's going on in your own psychology, because nobody's working with the same deck of cards. And then that allowing you to connect to your body, to connect to the wisdom of the body, to connect to the deep wisdom of your unbounded heart, connecting the left and right brain. To me, that is so much of what astrology is all about. And to understand that we are all part of nature, to understand that we can read nature. The more proficient we are in reading nature, the more proficient we will be able to implement truth in our own lives, because nature is the highest intelligence that we have access to. And so that's why I wanted to create that. That was the exegesis of, if that's even a word, of creating Starelai, and why I moved through all of the fears I had to face to just like get the damn thing done. And we're making improvements to it all the time. Feedback is welcome. We're not in the app stores yet, but it works on your phone and it works on your computer. And I hope you get lot of value from looking at the personal natal transits portal, because that is what's going to help you track as these nodal shifts move, like where are they actually hitting in your chart. And they may be experiences you have for like 3 to 5 months as these nodes move. And you can also look at the other planetary transits that you're going through that give you just deeper awareness into the lasagna layers of consciousness shifting that you are going through. And when you participate in that with consciousness, when you bring light to what you might not be understanding about the changes you're going through in your world, it becomes a deeply mystical experience. I'm like 2 years in to like really following my transits at the daily level, like the moon transits that move quickly. Like it's wild how much I can see the reflection of my emotional states shift from like day to day as the moon moves from zodiac sign to zodiac sign. Looking at where Mars is hitting, like where does it make most sense that I take action? Venus, where am I cultivating, how am I cultivating beauty? How am I understanding the cultivation of the value I place on beauty in my world? Saturn, how am I being called into more personal responsibility in the structure of my core? And I've had such a wild experience having gone through my Pluto square Pluto, my Neptune square Neptune. I have Pluto and Saturn conjunct, so I was going through the ringer of big midlife crisis transits the last 3 years, but I learned so much, and it made so much more sense to me, like what consciousness was asking me to step into and grow up into and clean up. Over the last few years. And I got that nuance, that contextual understanding through checking out my personal natal transits in Starelai, which is just a tool that avails your astrology to you. Because it's a lot to keep up with this. And it's like no one really has the bandwidth to track your astrology in crazy detail if you're having to do it in a book, in ephemeris. So that is what Starelai is for. So go check out what transits you're going through right now. Give yourself a read through of your birth chart. It's such a beautiful way to re-fall in love with yourself and your unique genius. And use the journal portal. Not that many people have used the journal portal in Starline. I really encourage you to, because can you imagine talking into your phone and you just give a rundown of what was going on for you that day? Then you click submit. Let the wheel spin for 20 seconds. And then Starlight gives you a 10 to 12 page paragraph reflection of reading your journal, like figuring out what's going on in your real life that you just told it. And then it brings up your birth chart and all of the personal natal transits that you're going through right now. And it just weaves it all together and says, all right, it makes sense that you're going through this because you're going through this personal natal transit. What's that trying to teach you? What does it want you to learn? And then what in your birth chart what allies, what archetypes in your birth chart can you lean on and work with to help you navigate this consciousness lesson with the most ease, like let's not make everything be hard. And so it's just like an amazing piece of technology that like helps you feel seen and helps you move into and through the lessons that you've got going on, and to celebrate the periods of like grace and support that the universe is also giving to you, because it doesn't all need to be hard. And so yeah, that is what I hope everyone gets from the technology that Starlight is. And we're introducing chat features in the next like 3 weeks that are going to be absolutely amazing, and even dial up the personalization and the cosmic support that you can get from this tool to a level I don't think most people have experienced. So go to starelai.com and check that shit out. It's amazing. If you want a personal reading from me, I have space in my calendar in January and a little bit in February. I'll probably dial down the amount of readings I'm doing in March going forward, but check that out. And I'll just leave you with the message that I want to see what kind of practical mystic you step into. I want to see the magic that you're doing in your life. So DM me, stay connected with me on Instagram at starelai.app. And I'm just wishing us all a beautiful journey of conscious growth in the next year and a half and beyond to infinity. And it's a pleasure to be here in the collective, in the world with you right now. We have much work to do, but so much beauty to experience together as well. So if you listen this long, thank you and toodles. Can't wait to see all the magic you can do.